Well, welcome back to the Old Fly Guy Network. And once again, thanks for joining us as we continue to travel across the country and meet exciting aviators. Today, we're in a very special venue. We're at the National War College here at Fort McNair in the nation's capital. And with me today, I've got two military aviators with a deep history of aviation operations and serving our country, Rusty O'Brien and Mace Carpenter. Welcome to the network, guys, and thank you for joining us in your airspace, literally, and setting up this really special venue. It's really a cool place here at the War College. I've never been here. You guys both, and we'll probably talk about that, have history here yourselves, and so great venue today, great environment, and we look forward to having a great conversation in this backdrop.
I was a student at the National War College in 2000, 2001, and then I came back and taught the Eisenhower School across the street from 2007 to 2010 when I retired. And it's a great location, incredible learning.
Yeah, it's the people, all kinds of military people out front there this morning ready to do what they do.
And they're all dressed up.
I
should have worn my formal jeans.
Well, they are all dressed up, but we're dressed down and we're comfortable today, so everything's perfect. In this upcoming episode, we're gonna in this episode and upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about the F-111 and specifically focusing, I believe, on the F-111F variant. We're going to get some really unique insight about this aircraft, the teams that flew them, the operations they were in, and the impacts that they had on a number of different conflicts. So we're looking forward to that, and Rusty and Mace are going to help us navigate that here as we move forward. Not only both Mace and Rusty have really a long history, a deep history in aviation and serving our country. We've got, I believe, 27 and 34 years of experience, active duty in serving the country, and they really have some unique insight, things that most of us probably haven't heard before or haven't talked about before, behind the scenes on what really took place to make that F-111F platform so successful. So stay with us today. This and upcoming episodes, these two fellows are going to help us navigate that and bring it all to light. So to get started, the first discussion today, we're going to talk a lot about, I think, the platform, the aircraft itself. But maybe before we get started, Mace, could you give us, Mace and Rusty, starting with you, Mace, would you give us a little background of how you got into aviation and how it all started for you?
Well, I was going to school in first grade, walking across the field, and I looked up in the sky, and there was a plane up there. And it impressed me, and I said, I think I want to be a pilot or a rock star or a pro baseball player. The pro baseball and the rock star stuff didn't work out. So over time, eventually, with my parents' encouragement and support, I went out to the Air Force Academy. And after that, I went to pilot training, and the rest is history for flying.
So you started early, had the passion, saw it, knew where you were going. I do want you to tell the one story, though, you mentioned to us or to me yesterday. I thought it was good. The first time you were on a plane is when?
Oh, yeah. I joked with my mom. The first time I was ever on a plane was flying to the Air Force Academy to go to school. And so I joked with my mom. I said, planes kind of scare me. Maybe I ought to take a bus. And she went, what? And that was a joke.
Yeah. Well,
that was my first flight. And the only two planes I knew by memory was the P-41, because I'd read a book on the Flying Tigers and Claire Chennault, World War II, and the B-52, because we watched them in Vietnam bombing on the evening news. And that was it.
Claire Chennault.
And Rusty, how did you get into this journey?
I'm a little bit older than Mace, just a couple years. Okay. And but I grew up in the post-World War II Korean War era, and so my father, of course, was in the war, and neighbors and all, relatives. TV was all about war movies, John Wayne. So early on, I knew I was either going to be a PT boat commander or I'd fly, Claire Chennault, Flying Tigers. Went to college, very liberal college, freshman year, very, very anti-war, Vietnam. And I remember walking with a guy I played football with, big weightlifter, Stoney, and students were blocking off the one entrance where they're having Marine recruiter. And Stoney and I were talking about, that ain't right. And so I thought, you know what? I want to talk to the guy. And so the student said, you can't go in. But then they looked at Stoney. I was not quite that big. And it was like partying in the Red Sea. They let us in. So I signed up that day to be into the Marine APLC program, which is Aviation Platoon Leader Candidate course. You go to Quantico in the summer, then graduation, you get your diploma, second lieutenant. But I learned that it was secondary for the Marines. You're a mud Marine first. I later learned in the military, that's why the Marines have such great air-to-ground coordination, because the pilots are mud Marines first. So I dropped out of that program, and then I knew I was going to be drafted, so I thought, I'm going to fly. And so the Navy recruiter was never in because I was playing several sports in college. The Air Force guy said, come talk to me. I finally did, and here I am.
Okay, okay. And like you said, if I get the numbers wrong, please correct me, but 2734, a long history of doing wonderful things.
When I went in, I was sympathetic to the anti-war movement, but flying in Vietnam kind of showed me. I thought about doing my 6 years and getting out, but I saw things that convinced me I need to stay. Because of we need to do our tactics better. I like the teamwork. It reminded me of playing sports in college, that you're not by yourself. You have others, and the component parts all work together. So it kind of worked out that
I liked
stayed
leading,
later.
and like to pile on to what Rusty said a little bit, you're serving a greater cause than yourself.
Yeah.
And that is kind of a core function. You got to be practical. He has a good retirement, good medical, and the camaraderie and a chance to lead, but you're serving. And it's
That's
a
the
good
point.
feeling.
It's the team perspective that I liked.
And you know, I've had the pleasure of talking with a number of military aviators, and what you said is so consistent. Your training and your backgrounds, I never hear anything different.
Yeah.
It was never about the one person that was flying the plane. It was about everybody that made the plane
team.
fly.
Yep.
And I hear that on, and I so many times, and I hope when the people listen to this, they really absorb that, because I think we could do a lot better out there if everybody could take a little bit of that mentality.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about, in combat, intel was critical. I mean, down to the crew chiefs, the avionics specialists, the guys that, kept your aircraft flying or flyable. So it is a team effort.
And I know that you have a long history of different theaters that you've operated in. And please, during this discussion, if something comes up, you mentioned Vietnam and your time there. I mean, the different theaters that you
I was a young lieutenant, 23 years old.
Okay.
At the very end of the war.
Right. Well, just don't let me miss any of that as we go forward. But we're here to start. Help us get started. I don't know where we start, because there's probably so much to talk about. But how do we kind of paint the picture around the F-111, whether it's A through H, I guess, or G?
Yeah.
And how do we paint a picture around that to give everybody an idea of what that aircraft was about?
When they built the F-111, it was McNamara's plane that would be efficient. Every service would fly it. It'd be a common plane that would do every mission.
Like the F-4.
Like the F-4. But it really couldn't do all the missions. It really was not a good air-to-air combat fighter. What it really excelled at was strike missions, air-to-ground missions, going deep interdiction. It excelled at the nuclear mission if it had ever been needed. It flew very fast, very low, in any terrain, in all weather, day or night.
I think we'll talk about that. The mission didn't really change over time, but the technology and the capabilities did, which made it a much more effective platform. In fact, the most effective platform in Desert Storm.
Yep, by far.
Mace brought up an issue. I remember I have photographs at home of the test version of the F-111 that the Navy wanted with Phoenix missiles on it, because the Navy was actually looking at that to be the interceptor for the fleet. And they found out that it was like, the wings.
It was just too
heavy,
big.
Heavy, it's too big.
Looked like a bigger aircraft than what you see
Exactly.
on an aircraft carrier or something, I guess. Or
Look
loaded
at how
out
big
at
the landing gear is, because of carrier landings.
Yeah. Well, it was loaded out at 100,000 pounds. I mean, that's
Huge
pretty heavy.
aircraft, yeah.
So you're carrying 42,000 pounds of gas, and then you got bombs and the aircraft weight, and it's a big plane. But it had it was leading edge at the time. It had terrain following radar, which meant you could fly it at 200 feet at night in the weather, and it would keep you 200 feet above the ground through mountains anywhere. And that gave you an incredible ability to penetrate without, and being a very difficult target. We could fly up to Mach 1.4, 200 feet off the ground. We could fly over Mach 2.5 at 50,000 feet. So it was extremely fast.
I have the third night at Desert Storm, the first night too, 200 feet hard ride at night, supersonic. And that's cool.
Yeah.
You feel comfortable. I didn't like flying 200 feet at night and training. That's scary. But in combat, it felt comfortable. One thing about the variants, each one was a little bit different. There was the FB-111 that the SAC had. Had longer wings, a little different platform. I've got a little time in the A, the D, the E, and of course mostly in the F. The F was they learned, it was the last one really built, they learned improvements. They scaled back the advanced avionics from the D model because it's too complicated, it's too hard to maintain. The advantage of the F also was that it had about 30% more thrust than the other variants. So that in combat, in mountainous terrain, that was a lot of advantage.
Yeah. For example, the E had 18,000 pounds of thrust per engine. The F had 25,000 pounds of thrust per engine. And so the neat thing, the most unique thing about the 111 though, its wings moved. And as you get going faster, it is hard to, drag becomes a real factor that keeps you from going faster.
Okay.
So if you can minimize your drag by pulling the wings back, then you're reducing the drag and you can accelerate or maintain speeds better.
Okay. So just for a comparison from the civilian side, is that similar like when the F-14 wings did that?
Yep.
Kind
Same
of thing,
thing.
but it was yours bigger aircraft.
Slightly bigger than 14. Now the difference was the F-111, we moved our own wings.
Yeah.
The F-14, it all happened automatic based on speed.
Wow. I didn't know. There you go. I didn't
So,
know that. So Tom Cruise wasn't doing that on his own. He had a computer.
With the wings,
Yeah.
the computer generally moved the wings on the F-14.
Okay. All right.
And
Not to detract there, but so the wings, that was a real issue to reduce the resistance, friction.
yeah,
keep it
reduce
going.
drag.
And the pylons moved with that so that, aerodynamically, the weapons, as you swept the wings back, the pylons with the weapons on it would streamline to be in the wind. So
Yeah, so it was an impressive design, and it was a way to go faster and be able to take it.
And of course, the range was what made it so effective.
So 2 or 3 questions here. One, when you're going that, you said you were at 50,000 feet, you said? So at 50,000, were you did you have to be in any kind of special equipment, pressurized or?
No. At 50, the way the Air Force works is you have to have oxygen over 10,000 feet.
Okay.
You have to have pressurization over 25,000 feet, cockpit pressure. And at 50,000 feet, you're supposed to be in a pressure suit, a spacesuit.
Okay.
And so the SR-71 pilots
Right.
wore the pressure suits. Now, I accidentally bumped over 50,000 a couple of times by a little bit, but at 50,000, you're really supposed to have pressure suits. And the F-111 had pressure suit hookups. It was designed to go up over 70,000 feet.
It had a G-suit hookup too. And of all my time in the F-111, I came from air-to-air F-4s where G-suit, that kept you vision.
Okay.
Oh, geez. I never plugged in my G-suit on the F-111 because we didn't pull that many Gs. Maybe 5 to 6, which is, you can,
Handle
that
if you're
yourself.
if you're trained for it.
You understand what a G-suit is?
Yeah.
Squeezes you.
Squeeze keeps
Yeah.
the blood in your head a little bit, right?
Yeah, as you pull Gs, the blood wants to run from your head on positive Gs, and it causes a blackout. And you can actually watch your vision tunnel down to a very soda straw and go away if you're not careful. Now, the way you do that is you squeeze your lower body and legs, and that forces the blood back up, and you can watch your vision get good again. So the G-suits were designed to squeeze the legs and the waist to help you do that. And
Okay.
the other was a maneuver, a grunting and tightness to force the blood back up.
In the F-111, I used my G-suit to hold Snicker bars and things like that.
It had her knife.
Yeah. Okay. And when did one other thing you mentioned, when when did the production, when was the first off the line, when did they start using this aircraft? What was that
The
timing like?
F-111A was the first one off the line, and of course it was really lambasted in the press. They call it McNamara's folly because the Navy dropped out and it had some problems because of the technology was so advanced. They deployed it early to Vietnam in '68,
Okay.
and they had quite a few losses. That turned out to be, of course, then the press really lambasted the aircraft. It turned out to be an actuator in the wing. They had some problems and had some fatal crashes. It went back, I forget the year, but I think it was '71, maybe, yeah, about that time. And it turned out to be, particularly during Linebacker 2, which was the bombing of Hanoi, Christmas time of '72, the F-111 was the most effective fighter because it was able to use its terrain following radar and its precision radar bombing to really wreak havoc on rail yards and things like that around Hanoi. And they lost a couple due to SAMs and things like that, but it turned out to be, it also had, I forget the numbers, but it was the most reliable aircraft towards the end of the war.
It was really effective. The Vietnamese called it whispering death.
Unique thing that, and I've been on the ground to see a 111 coming. You know where it's coming from, and it's coming so fast and so low, you don't hear anything until it's right overhead. And the Vietnamese really didn't like that because other aircraft you could hear. The F-111, it'd be, whew, and before you know it, bombs hit the ground and it's
Gone.
gone. Yeah. So they call it whispering death.
Wow. And you were saying, again, you were down to a couple hundred feet off the ground, and it sounds like, and we had talked, Rusty, a little bit, you were very clear about this, the terrain following radar was really the game change, that was a real difference in other aircraft capabilities.
You could fly all weather, day or night,
Yeah.
and that made a huge difference because you can't hand fly in the weather close to the ground.
Right.
A typical story is in training, what scared a lot of us, and maybe being scared of terrain following flight in mountainous terrain is good because the cross-cockpit coordination, you're all checking different things because it fails sometimes. We have friends that were killed doing that. I've seen guys hit a mountain at 600 knots. But the first time it happens to you and you're flying, the aircraft's flying itself, you're checking all your things, you don't know it, but you're going through a mountain valley, and then your rotating beacon happens to shine off the mountain walls that are above you, not too far away, and it kind of grabs your
Get
attention.
your attention.
It gets your attention.
You better hope all that, everything is working pretty darn well if you're going to see a beacon that close.
That's why the crew coordination, I mean, you're sitting closer than we are in the aircraft. You're tight, you're bumping elbows and shoulders. The crew coordination, you're both checking each other and different equipment during terrain following flight to make sure that you're seeing the same thing on your equipment that he's seeing on radar displays and things like that. So that it really crew labor intensive and coordination.
Yeah, the pilot's looking at it like an e-scope, and you're looking to make sure you're not penetrating a certain line. The guy that saves you is the guy in the right seat with the main attack radar. And he's saying, do you have the backside? And if he doesn't have the backside of the terrain within 5 miles, I'm going up.
Of course,
that kind of thing.
You're going 900 plus feet per second. So, I mean, you really have to
Didn't take long.
think and look forward as much as you can.
Help us understand, you just mentioned tight quarters in the cockpit. I think of, I don't know, maybe more aircraft that I think about, we have someone in the front and someone in the back. We have someone
I did that before.
You did, so you did that.
We're side by side.
You're
in
side by
111.
side.
Yep.
And what are the general responsibilities of each person while there's that cross coordination? How do you define that? How does that work?
The pilot flies the plane.
Okay.
And does generally the visual and outside. The WISO is responsible primarily for the navigation and the weapons employment. The pilot releases the bombs and direction by the WISO. It's a team. It's really a good team.
And very often the two overlook what the other is doing too, so that you can catch each other. And crew coordination is different for every pair. We've flown together a lot of times.
Yeah.
And each one is a little bit, the dynamics a little bit different. But that's why flight commanders, like when Mace was one of my flight commanders when I was an ops officer and a commander, you trust your flight commanders because they know their people in their flight, and you want to make sure the crewing, the two personalities,
Is the right.
complementary.
Yeah. Sometimes I couldn't crew a couple together because they wouldn't work.
And he'd come into my office and say, I got it in me. Anyway.
So, and we would try to crew people together so they got to be a tight working group.
You had an expression, we talked the other day about the crews that were together. What was the term you used, that when they fit right or something, there was something?
Well, we had a thing called hard crewing.
Yeah.
Maybe it was hard crewing.
Yeah.
And you said that once you get the right team, you didn't want to break them up. And just like you said, the magic of that.
Because they work together well. You know, they can anticipate what the other guy's doing. And you know, maybe he doesn't check something, you kind of look over your shoulder and see what he's doing too.
Yeah. In general, we told the schedulers, we had form crews, and you can just schedule these guys together all the time. You had secondary crews, you can schedule them with these two. But if you go outside that, you need to talk to the flight commander or the ops officer to get non-standard crewing, because the coordination was really important.
And often, you know, particularly when you get a new air crew in, you team him with somebody who's more experienced. It's just natural.
Yeah.
Natural.
Yeah. So you'd have a very experienced Wizzo with a new pilot, or vice versa, and for the training, and then eventually you get into your flights and you get a good team going.
How many do you have? I know you gave me these numbers. I forgot. I'm sure you can help me with this. But how many of these aircraft were produced? How many do we roughly? What were we looking at?
I think F-111F, if I remember, there was between 105 and 110 produced.
Okay.
There were multiple ejections. I think a lot were successful, i.e. the guys lived. There were, in the F model, there were 8 total fatal crashes. I think 3 of them were, ejection was not attempted.
Okay.
So then in the end, there are a few in museums, a few in static displays, but I think 70 some were eventually cut up into pieces because that was arms limitation treaty. The Russians feared the F-111, and that's why they wanted them not just put in the boneyard when it was retired. They wanted them cut up into little pieces until, you know.
The F-111 is the only aircraft mentioned by type in the SALT agreements, the strategic arm limitation treaties with the Russians. And the agreement was the Russians wanted us to say we would not forward position the F-111s in Germany.
Correct.
Because if we did, we could have hit Moscow with them,
Yeah.
and they couldn't stop them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like when we sat tactical nuclear alert early on in the days of Lake and Heath, 70s through mid 80s, we didn't air refuel. You know, if we had to launch with a tactical nuclear weapon, our targets were in the east, Eastern Europe, and into Baltics, and it was unrefueled. And you know, you were on your own.
Yeah.
Yes, most of those missions we knew.
You had a recovery
You had no
base
recovery, but
with a couple 100 pounds of fuel sometimes. But you had to, during the nukes, you had to be able to hit your target and get 1 mile or get 8 miles past it, 1 minute past it.
Okay.
And if you had enough gas to do that, you executed your mission. You got safe escape, which was, I think, is 9 miles actually, and then you ejected if you ran out of gas. And that was how important the nuclear mission was.
To sacrifice the plane.
And the people, if you had to.
But the range is critical, and even in Desert Storm. A fortunate thing is that one of the advantages we gave to CENTAF planners who are leading planning the missions, they based us in southern Saudi Arabia, which we were outside the Scud range, which was beneficial to us because I had friends that were flying F-15s and things like that up north, and I was talking to one F-15 squadron commander on secure phone, and they were under Scud attack. That impacted their sortie rates and all that because not only getting out there and working when you have Scuds hitting the base, but the mental thing.
Oh, yeah.
We were in luxury, we were outside that range. We also gave the advantage to CENTAF that we could often hit some of our targets, and first night, my target was not too far in. We didn't have to refuel coming back. So air refueling had always been the limitation for CENTAF because all the huge number of aircraft from all the allies, a massive amount of aircraft each night, and when aircraft didn't have to air refuel, that was more boom time from the tankers that was available to other people. So we gave a lot of advantages to CENTAF.
And tankers are critical. The limiting factor on how much air power we could put into combat in Desert Storm, Iraqi freedom, enduring freedom in Afghanistan and Allied force in Kosovo, limiting factor was tankers.
Okay.
We
So
knew that back when I was a CENTAF Weapons and Tactics Officer setting up the tactics that were going to be very different for Southwest Asia. Back in the 80s, we knew that it was not the fuel offload that was limitation, it was the number of booms. And quick story, I remember the first time you go up there, Desert Storm, and it was lights out, calm out, air refueling. And sometimes the lights went on, frightened you. All these aircraft everywhere.
The scariest part of Desert Storm for me was not the target where you're being shot at and, you know, tracers going around you and all that. It was the tanker. Because they would put 15 tankers 500 feet apart, and you'd have 40 to 60 fighters coming in.
Of different type aircraft.
Different type aircraft. But so there's no real good margin, and everybody is trying to look out for each other. Now the fighters were turning on every light they could possibly turn on so they didn't run into each other. The tankers were scared because they can't defend themselves or anything, so they would turn all their lights down to minimum and go tactical. So I would pretty much tell my guys, okay, at this point, go to your refueling altitude and point towards the light you think is there.
We had,
because
unfortunately, early in the war, we had
amazing
one of
concept.
our younger pilots who became disoriented when somebody turned lights on, and all of a sudden he hit a tanker. So both aircraft were covered, and I remember the F-111 was cleared for one-time flight back to England because it was bent. The airframe was bent, and the aircrew was told, "Don't go over 360 calibrated because it'll shake itself."
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah. Again,
Of course, you press it over the Mediterranean. We'll see.
the pilot was a little concerned there was something below him, so he unconsciously pulled back when he was coming off the tanker, and the vertical stab went up to the fuselage of the tanker, and his wingtip hit one of the tanker's engines. And of course, the tanker depressurized and called a mayday, and they didn't know what happened. But everybody, like Rusty said, got back safely.
I think I would have, my civilian position again, would have never thought about that.
You can stop 1 second.
Forgive the intrusion. There's a water outage off base. They're shutting the water off on base here at noon today. So
Okay.
people are going to be leaving. So do what you got to do before noon. Stay as long as you want, 1400 if you need to. Just leave it at the facilities will be out.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's scary.
So I'm going to go back. From a civilian perspective, I would have never thought about, I think about I understand the tanker concept, but what you just talked about, I never thought we would have 4 or 5 tankers that close and 30 or 40 aircraft all
more.
trying to fill up at the gas station.
Or more tankers, yeah.
And how that dangerous, I think that's a really unique perspective, that your fear was not about the mission,
Right.
it was about the refueling process.
Yep. And the tankers are absolutely critical. They're really heroes, and you can't say enough about them because they really would hang it out at times to make sure they got the gas people needed to go out and do what they were going to do.
Wow. How long, to put that in perspective, how long could you fly on a full tank? How many nautical miles were we talking, or hours?
It depends on if you're going down low or not.
Yeah.
When
Just
you,
to put something in perspective, is it 2-3 hours? Is it 1 or 2?
3.5 hours.
Okay, so it's 3 to 4 hours maybe, depending
and that's
on
with
what.
a high, low, and high mission back.
Yeah, okay.
Your fuel burn rate is about half at higher altitude than it is low level.
Okay.
and the air refueling, like for our missions, NATO support, the traditional mission for the F-111F in England, we didn't air refuel that much because the tankers were given to the short-legged fighters. We didn't air refuel that. We practiced it. We didn't, for combat, we didn't really plan on that very much. It was standard, both pre-strike and post-strike air refueling for Desert Storm. Although there was some, depending on conditions, we could get back without air refueling.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective of what's going on I'd say behind the scenes, I'm not sure if that's appropriate, but what's happening to keep the mission. It's back to the team. I never heard anyone say, and I'm sure the tanker flyers appreciate that they were the unsung heroes in the process.
Oh, they're great. Later in Iraqi freedom, the ground forces moved so quickly up north, but they didn't secure all the air defenses that the Iraqis had. So our fighters were getting up north further, and they didn't have the play time, the fuel, to hit all the targets they needed to hit. So I went to the director of the tankers, the director of mobility forces, and I said, hey, there was a guy named Kurt Chakowski, and he'd been my group commander at Holloman. And I said, we need the tankers to go north. He said, Mace, you willing to risk a tanker for that? And I said, yes, because one tanker can save a lot of lives if we can hit these targets on the ground.
Example for Desert Storm.
He said, that's all I needed to hear.
Okay.
And it was cool because the air component commander got on the first tanker that went north into Iraq, over Iraq. So you've got the 3-star general and a couple of lieutenants flying the tanker that went north. And I think they flew within 90 miles of Baghdad. And they have no protection. They had no radar warning gear.
I think the threat was a little bit different. Desert Storm, Desert Shield timeframe, preparing for a Desert Storm, I was the one who coordinated with the Black Hole, which was a very top secret, very small cell that did all the mission planning at CENTAF. I'd go up to Riyadh to coordinate these things, and General Glosson had asked me, can you hit targets up near Kirkuk, which was way up north, and I did a quick calculation of fuel and I said, we can do that, but can we drag some tankers across into Iraq? We're talking like on the first, second night. And the tanker guys just wouldn't do that because we said, 5,000 feet, well, maybe get some F-15 protection. Yeah. No. The difference was the air threat, the unknowns in Desert Storm. We didn't know how many Iraqi MiGs would be up and all that. I can see the tankers not wanting to do that. We eventually didn't do those targets, but it was a different situation.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. Can you tell me a little bit, because you shared this with me, Rusty, of kind of the where the F-111 started and how it migrated over. I think it started in the States and ended up being based in Europe somewhere, correct? And how all that
different
worked.
models. The F-111F, the one, the most capable F-111F, the last one built, was first started coming out in '72, and they had a training, I think, in Texas. Then they moved to Mountain Home Air Force Base. They were operational for a couple years, and then there was a thing called Operation Radio Switch. There were F-4Ds based at RAF Lakenheath, but NATO and the U.S. wanted to put the longer range, all-night weather aircraft in England instead. So Radio Switch, the F-4s came back to the U.S. The F-111F wing from the 366th wing at Mountain Home went to Lakenheath, and that was April of '77. So that was the first time they were there. But there were already F-111Es at Upper Hayford in England.
And our primary mission was nuclear alert. It was the nuke mission supporting the total U.S. Cold War nuclear mission.
Okay.
And it was an integrated part of that. And the first thing you checked out on was becoming nuclear certified. So when I got to Upper Hayford, that was the first thing. And then you went out and did training for conventional war and attacks.
But the conventional mission morphed in time too. When the F-111F first got to Lakenheath, it did not have called the PAVE TAC laser designation system. It was an IR acquisition and laser designation for laser guided bombs. And that was introduced in '81. I was one of the first crews checked out in that. But until that time, the first few years, I was a weapons officer in the 494th. And our tasking was basically to stop Russians coming into Europe, in Germany. And we did that with Rockeye, which was a type of
Cluster bomb. Yeah.
cluster bomb thing, antiquated. And slick Mark 82 500-pound bombs, unguided. And that was, we had bridge targets and things like that, but that was mostly the target set. Things changed completely when the PAVE TAC came in because the Air Force was going to precision. Laser-guided bombs was the most efficient way to destroy targets. A laser-guided bomb has a hit radius of 10 meters. You're talking a 500 or 2,000-pound bomb hitting just pretty close.
Across the room here.
More than that was a miss. So an F-111F with a good crew and a good system dropping a radar-guided bomb with, using attack radar to identify targets. In combat, I would say, 100, 200, 300 feet would be a good mission. Very often, not even close. So the precision capability that was introduced in 81, 82 with the paved tack system completely changed everything. Of course, that was why the F-111F from Lakenheath was chosen to attack Libya in 86. And lessons learned from that was why the F-111F, the 48th wing from England, was not supposed to go to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We were a NATO unit. There was a unit I used to fly and train with at Cannon Air Force Base, F-111D in the 27th Fighter Wing. They were tasked to go. But at the last minute, not quite the last minute, it was in August of 90, they decided to take the F-111Fs and send them for the war against Iraq because of precision, the paved tack
Because
system.
of the precision-guided bombs, and it was a big thing to do. And as I had mentioned last night, the Air Force was building very smart planes with dumb bombs. They thought that was the best way to do combat. And if you're at low level, it's a fair assumption. But in Desert Storm, we were low level the first night or so, and after that, we went to medium altitude. And you can't really be very precise with dumb weapons at medium altitude, no matter how good your targeting system is in the air, because you've got changing winds and temperatures, and it makes a difference.
The value of the F-111F in Desert Storm, if you remember the shock and awe, that was the focal point of the air campaign, was they wanted to use precision weapons to take out command sections, to take out key radio facilities and chemical warfare storage, airfields, things like that that required direct hits.
Right.
The problem was, at that time, there were very few capable aircraft, and all the inventory they had, all the Allied aircraft that were deployed, very few could drop precision weapons. 117s, yes, but there were very few of them, and they only had 1 or 2 bombs. We had 68 aircraft, could drop 4 each aircraft. There were TLAMs, which is the Navy Tomahawk missiles,
Oh, okay.
but there were few number 2. So bottom line, the advantage that the F-111F, our wing, gave to the planners was that we were precision force multiplier. We could hit more targets, precision targets, which allowed General Glosser, the Black Hole, to use TLAMs and the 117s, and that few amount of precision weapons they had to hit the most critical leadership targets the first couple nights, where we hit the same things, but we hit a whole bunch more.
Yeah. And the cruise missiles then, they couldn't penetrate hard targets. So they could hit something precisely, but if it was a hardened aircraft shelter, a ammo bunker, or something hard, they couldn't penetrate.
Yeah, with the Blue 109 hardened warhead for our 2,000 pounders, for example, it would go through hardened shelters easily. Very often, I'll get you videos. You see the bomb would go through, and sometimes it just leave a little hole in the top of the shelter. But what would happen is these huge blast doors would just be blown away, and then everything inside that shelter, when you have a 2,000-pound bomb coming in and you've got a hardened shelter around you, it's just disintegrated. Not quite disintegrated, but
So you got a 10 to 15-foot crater in the middle of the shelter, and it destroyed everything.
Just for our group here, what the inventory, we talk about smart bombs, and we talk about, is it laser guided? What is the inventory that you could carry on this aircraft?
Well, we carried the laser-guided bombs primarily, and we had 500-pound laser-guided bombs, and we had 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs. And by the end of the war, we had a 4,500-pound laser-guided bomb, the GBU-28.
48.
Yeah, that went down, estimated 150, 200 feet before it blew up.
That was the original bunker buster.
That was kind of like the concept that came to mind when I heard that.
But also,
Those are the lasers. Now, the optical, we had GBU-15s. And they were flown optically. One plane would generally release it, and another would stand off, and through the nose of the bomb's camera, they would guide it right onto the target.
TV guided.
TV.
I remember I planned this mission, and friends of mine flew it the first night, and we were targeting Saddam's palaces. They knew that he probably wouldn't be there, but just to show we could do it, they put a GBU-15 into one of his bedroom windows, and it's a TV guided bomb. So the Wizzo's flying this thing, and it's like you're in the bomb, and you see the palace. All of a sudden,
Coming.
There's the window, and you go right into the bedroom window.
Blip, and it goes out.
We also dropped a lot of unguided ordnance in Vietnam, in Desert Storm too. There was some CBU, some Gator mine, which is incendiary. Over time, maybe 72 hours, to kind of keep people away from areas. We dropped, I liked a weapon we planned quite a bit, which was a unguided 4 Mark 84 high drag gravity bombs. I liked them because you could fly supersonic with them, you could fly low, and they were extremely accurate. Our system, our ballistics in the aircraft was so good with them that you could put 4 2,000-pound bombs, you know, very accurately using
couple
radar.
dozen feet.
You know, a couple dozen feet away from the target, and 4 2,000-pound bombs. I mean, we did that. We picked that one for the Al-Taji big power generation facility near Baghdad. And rather than use CBU, we took out some of the substation that, you know, nodal analysis is what was done there when the first times it was used. When you look at like a power generation system, it's huge. But sometimes the electricians can find out the little things, this little thing over there, if you take that out, the whole thing goes down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that became the, you know, the focal point of the targeting, that nodal analysis of the shock and awe campaign. We fit into that very well because of our precision. There were times though, like with the unguided BSU 50s, which are the 49s, the unguided gravity bombs, that we could deliver very accurately, were very effective.
The earlier, one of the things you've got to worry about when you're attacking a target, especially low altitude, is blowing yourself up, because the bombs are traveling right along with you. They start to slow down, but they can blow up and frag the aircraft.
Good
Now,
point by Mace.
What we did was, in Vietnam, we developed a weapon called Snake Eyes, and they had a metal fin that would come out when the bomb deployed and would slow it down a whole lot so the plane could get clear of the explosion. You mentioned the BSU 49s and 50s. They improved the metal fin and made what they call a balloon, kind of a balloon parachute. And it would come out the back and slow the bomb down again so you could drop it at low altitude and not blow yourself up.
What he said is exactly right. What I was talking about, why we liked them, you could deliver them fast at 400 feet. They would come off, and they could be carried that fast. Some weapons you couldn't carry that
Well,
fast.
that's what I was also wondering.
But then they slow down as soon as, so you get separation, they then slow down, then they hit the target, and you're gone.
Okay, because I'd seen, I guess I've seen some pictures of the Snake Eyes or the different, I've seen bombs like that or pictures of them, and I assumed it'd slow it down and never really thought about
That's the reason.
exactly what that, I thought it was more of a guidance type of thing to drop it, but clearly it was self-preservation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Delivery.
You'd like to get as low as you can. I mean, back to World War II, in fact, when I was in F-4s, a lot of our more accurate deliveries were dive bombs, because the Stuka in World War II, the German fighter bomber, you know, the higher you get to 90 degrees, the more accurate your bomb is going to be, because the circular area of, you know, where the bomb could move. But the aircrew, I mean, you have to get up high to do that. And of course, when you're up high, you're exposed to AAA and SAMs. That's why the F-111 has the advantage of, we like to go in low. The Balutes gave us the ability to go in 400 feet fast, get away from the target.
Yeah. And again, we fly low also to avoid radars. And the radars will acquire you, and then it can guide missiles on you. So you want to stay low to give them less reaction time to be able to do that. So that's why you like low altitude. But we found out in Desert Storm early on, after the first night or two, that there was more danger with the AAA and everything than there was with being low. So you're better off being medium altitude, delivering, and you could watch the SAMs or the AAA coming up at you and maneuver if you had to, and it worked out better.
Uncertainty is probably a key word for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, because there were so many things that weren't certain for us. We didn't know how the Iraqis were going to react. What Mace talked about is that we had to assume, because of the advanced systems they had from Russia, SAMs, AAA, things like that, and radars, that we would have to go in low all the time. We found the first night, in fact, my wingman the first night attacking Ali al-Samam airfield, he got a Silver Star because we had terrain following radar jammers that the Iraqis got from the Soviets. So we would get hard fly-ups. We had to hand fly. Denny Ertler hand flew, not terrain following radar, below 50 feet at night 600 knots, still killed its target. We're getting back. We all did that, and all of a sudden we started comparing notes, and we realized that, and we were all having SAM shot at us. You know, and guys, an F-111 doesn't turn that well. The way to defeat a SAM is you watch it, and then you pick the right time, you break into it. F-111s can't do that. We had guys out maneuvering SAMs, and we're thinking,
Yeah.
it took us a day or two to figure out what the Iraqis were doing. Was they were firing a lot of their SAMs ballistically. They were not radar guided. And part of that was the success of the F-4G Wild Weasels, who they were shooting AGM-88, huge
Anti-radiation
you can
missiles.
program them to go after radars and SAMs.
Okay.
And they go up, 80,000 feet, and they come down, okay? And for the target area, they will program in, depending on what Intel says from the electronic order of battle, all right, we've got this radar here, we've got this SAM, and this missile's coming down going, I got you, I got you.
So this is our defense to
We
not-
attack their radars that guide their
And what I
SAMs.
liked is
Now,
that-
one mission that it kind of got my attention. I was flying along and I had come off target and I looked down and all of a sudden I see this big bright plume and it's an SA-8 surface-to-air missile system, or an SA-6. I'm sorry, SA-6. So it was down there and I could see it was like daylight. And one of the anti-radiation missiles that the F-4s flew hit it. And I was right next to it. So it went through the transporter erector launcher, and then it just blew up my fireball. And I'm going, yes! And I go, oh man. So I'm looking up now because that thing came fairly close to me before it hit that SA-6.
Let me tag on to that.
I was wondering about that
One
myself.
of the things of warfare I like is the psychological impact. Early in Desert Shield time frame, I was going up to coordinate with CENTAF. I had a very good friend, Jeff Feinstein, who was the last ace. He had 5 MiG kills in Vietnam. Good friend of mine. He was running the ATO generation for CENTAF. And early, we just got there, and I was asking different questions. I said, Fang, what about call signs? And he said, with all the NATO aircraft, maybe a random generator. I said, remember PACAF? You gave mission-type aircraft a certain call sign. Like all the air-to-air guys, which we were at that time, were weapons, like cannon, dagger, sword. And then the harm shooters were beer, like Coors, Bud, things like that.
Staff.
Well, one advantage is that when you're on a tanker, and all of a sudden you hear Coors flight checking it, I've got weasels. Or if you have dagger flight, you go, there was my F-15 force protection. But the advantage, too, is that we knew the Iraqis were going to be listening to our radio transmissions. And what he just talked about, because of what Mace talked about, when you have a weasel shot, you got bombers going in, and you got these harm missiles coming down, and the call from the weasel when they take a shot like that is Magnum. Then everybody knows, okay, there could be one coming down. Well, guess who's listening to that?
The other side.
The Iraqis.
Iraqis.
So here's these guys, and they're in their little radar shack or in their SAM thing, and all of a sudden they know cores are in the air, okay? Then they hear Magnum, they turn everything off.
Yep.
We think that was what's happening, and that's why, miraculously, we thought the first couple nights, our guys are out flying SAMs? It can't be,
But it was that
Well,
influence too. Huh?
The radio call is kind of funny because what we learned is F-111s, if I yelled Magnum, there's a chance they're going to shut down the radars, whether there were F-4s there or not. So we'd go in a strike package without F-4s, and I'd go, Magnum.
Let me finish that.
And the F-4s said, they found out we were doing that, and they said, okay, that's okay. However, we're going to come up with a new word. Don't use the new word.
Okay.
Finish one thing about, so I was telling Feinstein about the call sign. She said, yeah, we'll do that. And he said, so what call sign do you want the 48th wing to be? I'm a big Minnesota Viking fan.
Okay.
I said,
Packers.
NFL call signs. And I thought, I want to be a Viking. How great can it be? I don't want to be a Packer.
I was a Packer.
As it
I was
turned
going to
out,
say I saw the helmet.
as it turned out, my missions, I was a Seahawk, But
So it mixed them up to all the football teams. I was Cardinal, I was Ram, I was Packer, I was Viking. So it mixed it up a little bit. But you bring a lot of personality into this, and and people handled the stress and the combat a little different. Some people, I got fired up. It was something that Winston Churchill once said, there was nothing more exhilarating than being shot at without effect. And that was combat.
Yeah, the word got back through the Wives Network, unfortunately. Third mission coming back, Sammy and I were being shot at by ZSU. We had a MiG-25 chasing us. We had SAMs everywhere. We're pulling up into Saudi airspace, and the procedures were you don't be shot down by Saudis or our own SAMs or aircraft. So when you come in, we were a single ship, dark, hauling ass. You start pulling up, and then you squawk. You get on the radio, and you say, Seahawk 22, climbing, blah, blah, blah. So everybody knows who you are.
You're right.
I forgot to tell him I was going to put the lights on. And we're climbing up. We didn't know there was weather. And all of a sudden, we're climbing up after just having been shot at and all these things going off. And all of a sudden, the clouds, when you have it's like, he goes, oh, shit. And then after things calmed down, I said, I'm sorry. And then I said, hey, now, wasn't that one of the coolest things in your life? And he said, what are you talking about? I said, getting shot at. That's cool. And he said, you're one sick motherfucker. Somehow that got back to the wives.
Yeah, but the crew coordination was critical. I flew with the second youngest weapons systems officer in the wing, Dave Nahom. He later retired as a lieutenant general, 3-star. And anyway, but on one target, for example, and you had to lie to your Wizzo sometimes. We were hitting Latifia rocket propellant production plant, and it was a 16 ship. And so there was a lot of target. This was in the south part of Baghdad, and there was just AAA going everywhere, SAMs going off, and I'm turning from my initial point into on the target run. And I'm going, okay, you got the target, you got the target. No, I don't have it yet. I'm getting close, because he had to find it on radar, and then he would shift to the paved tack pod, which was the video IR, and then pick it up, and then he could
So
lace
he
the bomb.
had to see it on
He's
the
in a
scope,
scope.
and then he had to see it on the missile, on the bomb.
No,
Is
well,
that-
there's two, he switched, they call it video switching.
Okay.
And he's on the radar, and he gets the right blip, so that gets him in the general area.
Okay.
And then he switches to the paved tack pod, which is looking at, it's not on the bomb, it's a pod on the plane.
Okay.
And it's looking at the visual, and once he can see the building he's going for, then we can release the bomb, he can fire the laser, and the laser guides in and blows up the building. So anyway, we're coming in, and I'm on the IP run, and I go, you got the target yet? Not yet, but I'm close. He says, how's it outside? Because he's in the scope, he can't see. And I go, it's calm, no problem. Okay. How's it outside? How's the threat? Because he's seeing radar warnings and all this other stuff, and he's hearing sounds that tell him radars are going off and target. How is it outside? Well, it's fine, we're good, just find the target. And then a second, he pulled his face off of the scope just to give his face a break a second, and there's stuff blowing all around us. And he kind of freezes for a second, because I've been telling him we're good.
We're good.
And
Don't tell him the
I didn't want to
truth.
distract him.
Right.
And so I looked at him and I hit him. I went, Dave, get in the scope, boom. And he goes, okay. And he got in. And he was there were 4 aircraft that hit the target that night. He was one of the 4 that got the target, hit Latifia, and we got off. But that's a time
You
of
got to know,
personal
kind
things.
of like,
Yeah.
you got to get him out of the wrong zone and make sure he's in the right
Yeah,
zone.
I
Mace
mean-
brings up a good point that we're trained, and we all performed, but everybody, different personality types, takes it a different way. I mean, I remember that first night, Ali al-Salam airfield attack that I was on the first night, in the first hours of the war, when the first target's being hit, and it was one of the most defended targets. And yet, I remember a couple of guys saying that what they remember most of that mission was, of course, your cockpit is all dark. That first night of the Gulf War was one of the darkest nights of the year. And that's why they picked it, because everything was so dark. And you're flying low, and you have everything that's turned down. There's no lights in the cockpit. Guys remarked, Duck Donalds told me, he was number 4. He said, I could read my lineup card, you write down frequencies and stuff like that, by SAM light. As SAMs would go off, the momentary SAM would go off, and, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. So different people take things, a different way. I remember the first night, after 6-7 months of uncertainty, and we finally realized we're going to war. We had the briefings, we knew. And then, because I was key planner, ran the team, Ali al-Salam was our wing commander had me go through every target the first 3 nights. And based on what I found out from CENTAF, I would assign 3 things to each target. The importance to CENTAF, how important the target was, how my interpretation of how difficult it was to hit that target, and then defenses. And so Ali al-Salam was the second most important target, and was also very highly defended, number 2. And I remember each guy, we were staying in a little bedroom part of the Saudi hangars were the state of the art. They were beautiful hangars. We had little
Hardened aircraft shelters with rooms, sleeping rooms.
Right
and all.
inside the
And so
hangars.
some of the guys in the mission were asking me, we're supposed to be going to sleep because this is like the afternoon because we're flying at night. And the guys they said, this is a tough target. And are the SAMs as tough as, Intel said they were? And I said, yeah. So what are you going to do? And then the guys were asking me, how am I going to get to sleep? I said, well, here's what I did. I said, I talked to our admin lieutenant, and I told her I wrote a letter to my family. And I said, I'm going to put it on the table over there, and if I don't come back.
Wow.
So then, before we went out to fly, I noticed there were 5 other letters on the table. But then you get pumped up. I remember taxiing out that first night. All this anxiety, uncertainty. I knew the details about the targets and all that some people didn't know about defenses. But I thought, well, we'd just do our job. I remember it reminded me of playing college football, running out of
The tunnel.
the tunnel. And then you have the cheerleaders, you have the band, you have signs, you have people cheering. We taxi out. Remember that? We had everybody, the cooks, the maintenance, Intel, the cops, everybody. They had signs. They were American flags. They were cheering us. Our cockpits are open, canopies are open. And so it was just like, talk about getting pumped up.
It was pumped. And when we recovered, they had the same thing. They're
I
cheering us
remember
and
seeing some of that with aircraft
Yeah.
return when they had some of that filming.
And after the first couple of nights, it kind of died away a little bit. But us going to combat and kicking butt.
But you brought up before about it's a team effort. It was unbelievable. I found this out talking to some of the maintenance supervisors this past year who were there for the different squadrons. With all the limitations we had, maintenance and parts, desert, the anxiety of going to war, our maintenance guys, we've had a 10% higher mission capable rate, meaning the rate the aircraft could fly, than we had back home in England in peacetime. This was
good.
All the challenges. And I talked to the supervisor, I said, how did that happen? Leadership of the senior NCOs, and then they were telling me we had to force these young crew chiefs and avionics specialists, fuels, whoever it was, these guys wanted to work double shifts. They wouldn't go home. So it was a matter of a can-do attitude and this teamwork, and I think damn good leadership by the NCOs that kept everybody together.
And flexibility and the ability to do things. I taxied out on one mission, and I'm getting ready to take off with a 4-ship, and they said, Mace, abort, come back in. Okay, so I go back in, we got a new mission for you. So within, 20 to 30 minutes, they had completely unloaded the weapons on our plane and reloaded them. We run in, get a new target, and we're planning it as in the crew van as we go back out to the jets and take off again. But the maintenance crew with the weapons guys was just incredible how quickly they switched over everything.
And you would go, you'd accept your aircraft, and then, there was a lot of handwritten comments on the weapons.
Yeah, they would
This is for you,
write on the
Saddam,
bombs.
Right, I bet there's little
Well, I
messages.
think there'd be a thing from, this is
Hello, Saddam.
Saddam. This is from, whatever the crew chief's name is, from, Ohio.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I can share a couple of pictures with you of the bombs that
I
I
bet
took.
you probably, they probably
kinda
got some
fun.
interesting graphics. So I know, you were talking, and thanks again for sharing that conversation about the letter and how you dealt with it from the combat side. But how did your families deal with this? You had families at home and away. How did that all happen?
Good commanders, and we had good commanders at Lake Neath, set up and with the wives, family support networks, so that they have people to go to, they can get information, you can communicate, and they were set up well, I think, at Lake and Heath. And there was a lot of crosstalk, a lot of camaraderie, and that went officer and enlisted.
And
wives-
you were saying, I don't know, we were chatting a moment ago about maybe some bad information that might
Well,
have got,
yeah.
just at times it made it more difficult on them. Huh?
You know, at one point it leaked to the wives that we were going to lose one of the 3 F-111s on the first night alone. And that kind of freaked everybody out a little bit. And I got a little frustrated, and I actually talked to the wing commander about it, that I personally wasn't happy because this is bad information that's being proliferated, and I didn't believe it's true. And he agreed and engaged. But overall, I think they did pretty well, Don.
They did, and Mace talks about the leadership back home too. For a good part of Desert Shield, our vice wing commander, Barry Ream, had become the wing commander back at Lakenheath. And he handled a lot of things with the wives group and to make sure the right information came out.
Right.
He told me the story. Unfortunately, October, I think it was 10th of Desert Shield time frame, we had 2 guys we know very well in a training, nighttime laser guided bomb delivery in Saudi Arabia. They hit the ground. They were killed. Barry told me the story that it's a tough thing to do. He had to go to the house. And he remembers the story, and Sarah Jane Caldwell, who's come to some of our reunions, she's a wonderful lady, his Tom Caldwell's widow. As Barry said, he remembers walking up to their house, and she was staying with her mother in Newmarket. And he saw the curtains open up. And then the door opened up, and he's in his Class A's. When you're a military family and you see somebody coming up to your door, that's, they already know. In fact, her mother, British lady, as soon as the door opened up, she said, her words were, "Oh dear, I better put the kettle on." And Barry went into how tough that was. But he then helped provide the support to the family they needed. And like Mace said, it's the leadership that back home that keeps people together. And then the informal leadership.
Right.
There are squadron wives that bonded together. They, even to the point when the first few nights was on CNN, they'd get together and watch together.
Yeah.
And they'd it was a support group, a mutual support group. Their husbands were all deployed, flying, and so it was a mutually supportive group. And the leadership, I think, had a big role in making sure the right information, and maybe some things didn't get to the families.
Yeah, and this is prior to the war when Art and TC crashed, and they were my roommates. I lived with them, for the months after we deployed in August until through October when their plane went down. And then the wing commander called on me to be the investigating officer on the crash. And so I stayed with the board the whole time, and that's tough.
That's,
And it was one neat side story, if you can have one, is that Tom Caldwell got buried at Mattingly Military Cemetery, which is an American military cemetery in Cambridge, England.
okay.
And I think he was the first one to be buried there since World War II. But he had a British wife, and she made the request.
Her
to Congress.
parliamentarian and his congressman from Ohio together appealed to the U.S. and the British government to allow a non-World War II American be buried there.
Wow.
Each time we have a reunion, we have a ceremony at TC's grave. This past July, we were there.
Yep.
We had pipe band playing Amazing Grace, and we did a nickel on the grass ceremony. Nickel on the grass is a fighter pilot tradition. You say something, then you put a nickel on the grass. And there's this, I read a statement, and then 2 reunions ago, Sarah Jane Caldwell came, and of course she was the first one to put a nickel there. And then I would do it, and then the current 495th commander from the base. So that's a very special thing for us. As we did also, there were 14 other F-111F aircrew killed at Lakenheath. 4 in combat deployments, 2 in Libya raid, Art and TC and Desert Shield. The others were peacetime accidents in Scotland and Germany, England. And we do a nickel on the grass with a Jeremiah weed. It's revolting bourbon.
I kind of like it. I like weed.
Yeah, but we did that. And what I loved this year, we did it when we retired the 495th after the Gulf War. It was a very big surprise. We came back from the war, and Tom Lennon called the 4 squadron commanders in, and we're all in this euphoria still. We just back a month or two, and it looked like somebody shot his dog. And we're sitting there, and he said, guys, the Air Force is going to retire the F-111F. We all said, what? Because we kicked ass, you know.
Right.
We were the dominant air platform. And he said, because, you know, the Air Force is reorganizing and the aircraft is too expensive to maintain, blah, blah, blah. So he said, Rusty, you're the first one to go down. You've got to pick a date and all that. So in defiance, I picked Friday the 13th in December. And then the wing commander left, and General Guth was in. And they said, how do you want to retire the squadron? So I came up with an idea. We're going to have a New Orleans-style funeral. And so we're going to march to, we built a monument for our squadron. And like New Orleans, we had a time capsule that was like a coffin.
Steel tube.
And so we had the RAF band played dirge music, and we did slow march, you know. And that was to honor guys that were killed.
Yeah.
And also to honor the fact that the squadron's history, you know, we're closing it. But then after we have the toast and all that, the Jeremiah Weed and all that, we have a few statements, and I gave General Guth the flag. Mace was the moderator to retire the squadron. I gave a signal to the band. They'd play Dixieland music. They loved it, the RAF band. And we party marched back to the club and drank all night. And so, I won't mention names, but the first 2 colonels up the chain called me and they said, how the hell do you think you can do that? You know, no. So denied. So then finally, General Guth, who I barely knew, he called me in. I go in, yes, sir. And he said, what's this I hear about your ceremony? And he said, I was expecting something like that from you. And I'm thinking, oh, man. And then he said,
The reputation.
then he said,
precedes you.
so what's my role? and he loved it. So we did that. And what we've done the last 2 reunions, we've recreated that.
That's very neat.
This year we did it with a
Over
pipe-
in
England.
Duxford there.
We did it with a pipe band.
At Lakenheath.
Like me.
And the current squadrons, the F-35 guys and females, they're about 20% female pilots.
Yeah.
So they loved it. We did this, and they had coolers that they were bringing, and the monuments, the plaques we did there. So we had the pipe band play the slow music, and we did a nickel on the grass. I had different 111 guys read a name from memory. Burnley Bob Rudiger, call sign, the date he hit a mountain in Alaska, and then they would put a nickel on the grass. And then we did the Jeremiah Weed toast. And the young guys there, and female F-35 pilots, and some F-15 people too, they loved it. This was the wing commander, Winder, General Arthod, told me, this is July 30th, at the end, he said, you guys, you brought back our traditions, our history, because that's what I love to hear. They realize this is not just what history we made, it's their
It's the
history.
history of the 48th. And like I was telling you last night, the 48th came to England in World War II and eventually deployed and operated out of France. And that's why we're the only wing in the Air Force that has a name, the Statue of Liberty Wing. And after France and de Gaulle kicked us out, we went to England, Lakenheath, and that's where the wing's been. And it's a number of aircraft, from World War II aircraft to early fighters, eventually the 111, then the F-15Es, now they're transitioned to F-35s. And but we're all 48th.
Yeah.
And it's kind
And
of
it's
neat.
one history, it's a continuum. And what we liked is after we did the party march back to the O Club, we went into the patio, and the 495th Valkyries, they had a Valkyrie band. And I had talked to them a month or so before the reunion, and they played Jeremiah Weed song.
This is a very popular. We're going to find some of this.
And it's
Well,
all
they
nickel
stopped
on the
producing it.
grass.
Oh,
Nickel
okay.
on the grass from Vietnam era. And so, and they're playing, and it was so cool to see these young pilots, male and female, older generation, drinking together, singing these songs. And then we went out and we did what they introduced back in 2023 as an RAF tradition on top of all this, and that's burning a piano, which is kind of cool.
So
It's
we got an
RAF
upright
tradition.
piano, and we set it on fire, and somebody keeps playing the piano
Till
till
it
they can't
can't
anymore, and the
anymore.
flames are leaping up. Yeah, and everybody's getting drunk, going, "This is cool."
It's a cool tradition, and both times, two times ago, we're burning this piano, and of course, I'm drinking with General Campo. We're drinking whiskey. You know, nobody's wearing a hat, wearing flight suits. And then, you know, his guys are coming up playing the piano to see how long, you know, they're wearing Nomex flight suits, you know, so it's pretty.
It was good.
And then I remember all of a sudden the fire department comes. And,
Not you again.
yeah, and the sergeant, you know, they come and they got all their gear and all that, it's burning piano. And the general sergeant goes, "Sergeant, it's under control, I got it." I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, what you did, and what a wonderful way to sort of, as we conclude this, the first discussion is history. You're talking about history, and I think that's when you really inspired this conversation, Rusty. You started to thinking about, that's what you're trying to do, is capture history. In our conversation here today, share it forward. I'd never heard about the nickel.
I will get you.
I never heard about that before, but I will say, when I visited with your team, what was it, 2 months ago, down in my neck of the woods, you took the time to acknowledge the team members that were lost. I remember that.
That's big for us.
And you did that. So you don't do that you do that every time. And you're capturing that history and that respect and the family. It all just, it weaves together here.
It does.
Wonderfully.
And I mentioned Robin Olds last night when we were talking, arguably the greatest fighter pilot in the history of the Air Force.
And why I had a mustache for?
Yeah, handlebar mustache. But if you go to his grave at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado, you're going to see a bottle of weed and a bottle of usually Jack Daniels and a bunch of nickels
I've
on
done
his
that.
gravesite.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's kind of a neat tradition.
Real quick, getting back to the history. Early 2021, the Air Force decided they're going to reactivate the 495th Fighter Squadron, the one that we deactivated after the Gulf War. But they discovered there was almost zero history. I mean, no written history, there's no memorabilia. I had given some things to the Imperial War Museum, different issue. But they asked me to help them recreate, restore. 1 October 2021, they actually invited me to the reactivation ceremony. And Commander of USAFE actually said, "Well, you give Dingo, the new squadron commander, the flag." So I brought the old flag I still had. It was in my basement for decades. Gave him the old 495th flag. And at the party at the club that night, Vasco, the wing commander at the time, I'm having a beer with he and General Harjigan, the USAFE commander of all NATO air forces. And they were talking about history. And they said, "Would you help us recreate this history?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Dingo and I already planned the new 495th F-35 commander." And I said, "We're planning a couple of things." I said, "Like what?" And then I realized Dingo didn't brief him anything. So I told him about the New Orleans style funeral. And it was like, they both put their beer down at the same time and they both said, "Approved." So that started us off to, we do the reunions. The reunion is a key vehicle, but we have other things going on too. This video would be part of that. We want to give to the American Air Museum and to the wing and each squadron, so they have.
So they can pull all this together.
We've already, in July, we gave each squadron, and I've heard from some of the squadron commanders in the last few months how they love it. We put together, like the slides I gave you.
Yes.
All kinds of memorabilia, lithographs, we're getting photographs, we're helping them to restore their history. And so your videos are going to be a key part of that.
Well, your video. This is your platform. Go ahead.
So, and Rusty's done an incredible job putting together reams of history, you know, pulling stuff together, collecting it from other people, soliciting it, and we're getting a pretty good compilation of what the F-111F did.
Right.
What I like is that, like the things I sent you about the history, Mace has helped me. He's been helping me for 36 years as a team. But I have gone back to the surviving the Desert Storm commanders. And I've talked to them on the phone, email exchanges. I'll give them things so they can edit. So we want to make sure this is, I'm getting the same thing from maintenance supervisors and from air crew.
There's so
it's
much.
It's a team effort because it's our history.
Yeah.
And what General Arthod told me this past July, the briefings he heard, the written products we've given, what he likes about this, it's not history as written by a historian. It's history written by the guys who made it.
That's what this is all about.
Well, we appreciate what you're doing.
Oh, well, I can't tell you, this is great. I told you, I tell all of my viewers that I get more out of this than anybody, I'm convinced, because, and that's why I like about the fact we're sitting here, because the energy I feel is just almost overwhelming. What you guys have put forward, and your service is just is great. So anyway, we've got a lot more to follow here. This is just the front end. We're going to be talking about missions, more about the people that made all of this happen. So stick with us. Make sure you as always, follow us, subscribe to the channel. There's more of this to follow, and we're going to have these guys help navigate us in upcoming episodes. And we're just going to keep this thing rolling, because I think, as Rusty and Mace have said, there's just a lot of history, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Not only this episode and those to come. So as always, here on the Old Fly Guy Network, we advertise. Make sure you look out for those turbulence, look for those blue skies, and we look forward to having you in the next Old Fly Guy conversation.